A guy buys his first Wrangler. Within 6 months, he's dropped 4 grand on mods. Lift kit, mud tires, light bar, exhaust. His Jeep is louder, slower, gets worse mileage, and just threw a death wobble at 65 miles per hour. He followed everything the internet said. Here are 12 mods that quietly ruin your Wrangler and cost way more than you think. Number 12. Cold air intake. The cold air intake is the gateway drug of Jeep mods, and it's almost always a waste of money. The pitch sounds perfect. More air, more power, better MPG, meaner sound. But the second owners strap their Wranglers to a dyno, the whole thing falls apart. On the 3.6 Pentastar that powers most modern JKs and JLs, owners consistently report zero fuel savings and power gains so tiny you'd need a stopwatch and a prayer to feel them. It gets worse than that. These intakes rob low-end torque to chase top-end horsepower you'll never touch on the street, and the Pentastar barely has any low-end torque to begin with. So you're literally making your Jeep weaker in the exact RPM range you use every single day. And here's the dirty secret nobody mentions. They're not even real cold air intakes. They sit inside the hot engine bay, sucking in warm air that's been cooking next to the exhaust manifold. Some owners have hydro-locked their engines driving through puddles because the open filter was hanging out exposed. You paid $500 to lose torque, suck hot air, and risk a blown motor in a rainstorm. But this one's just the warm-up. The next mod destroys more Jeeps than almost anything else. Number 11. Oversized mud tires. On a daily driver, nothing screams, "I bought my first Wrangler last month," louder than 37-inch knobby mud tires on a Jeep that's mostly going to Costco and back. On the showroom floor, they look incredible. On your commute, they're a slow-motion disaster. Those deep, aggressive treads that look so mean in photos roar on the highway like a small airplane taking off. Your MPG tanks, sometimes dropping from an already rough 20 MPG down into the 13s. You wear them out twice as fast because they weren't engineered for pavement, and a single replacement in that size runs $400 to $600 per tire. However, the ride quality problem is even worse than the wallet damage. Those fat sidewalls flex on the highway, which makes your steering feel vague and floaty at 70 miles per hour. Braking distances get longer because there's less rubber actually gripping the road. And if you skipped regearing the axles, your transmission is hunting for gears every time you touch the throttle. You turned a decent daily driver into a loud, slow, expensive truck that's worse at everything except the mud pit you visit twice a year. Number 10. Cheap spacer lift kits. Everyone wants that lifted Wrangler stance, and the cheapest way to fake it is a spacer lift. You can find these kits online for under $150, and that price tag is exactly the problem. A spacer lift just shoves your factory suspension up by jamming a puck on top of your coil springs. Your geometry gets thrown off. Your caster angle drops from the factory 4.2 degrees, which creates more steering resistance. Your shocks run at the wrong angle because they were never engineered for that extra height, and the ride quality gets genuinely harsh, with owners reporting they feel every crack and bump in the road after install. But the real danger is what comes next. Bad geometry plus lifted height is one of the main ingredients for the infamous Jeep death wobble, a violent front-end shake so aggressive it feels like the truck is ripping itself apart at highway speeds. The only way to stop it once it kicks in is to slow down to almost a complete stop right there on the freeway. Saving $500 on a spacer lift for that kind of rodeo experience is not the flex people think it is. Number 9. Giant chrome light bars. Light bars are the mod that looks coolest in the driveway and causes the most problems everywhere else. A 50-inch LED bar mounted across your windshield looks incredible in photos. In reality, most states have laws requiring that bar to be covered on public roads, and blinding oncoming drivers at night is a quick way to get pulled over and ticketed. Then there's the wind noise. That flat bar acts like a spoiler sitting up there, and at 65 miles per hour, it creates a whistling drone that'll drive you insane on any road trip longer than an hour. However, the electrical side is where it gets really rough. Most cheap light bars let water pass their seals, which means they fog up, short out, and die within a year or two. And because they're wired into your fuse box, a bad install can fry electronics, drain your battery overnight, or even start an engine bay fire. The YouTube guys make it look like a 20-minute job. Reality for most people is a $400 install, another 200 to wire it correctly, and a blown unit you're tossing in the garage 2 summers later. Number 8. Aftermarket catback exhaust. Every Wrangler owner hits the phase where they want their Jeep to sound meaner, so they drop $800 to $1,200 on a catback exhaust, and 3 weeks later, most of them regret it. Because on the Pentastar 3.6, that aftermarket exhaust adds basically zero real power without a full tune. It just makes the engine louder, the kind of loud that sounds awesome at the car meet and absolutely miserable on a 5-hour road trip when the drone inside the cabin is giving you a migraine. And there's a hidden cost most guys don't see coming. That louder exhaust tone masks actual engine problems. A small exhaust leak, a failing catalytic converter, or a misfire that would have been obvious on the stock system is now buried underneath all that rumble. Owners have missed serious engine trouble for months because they couldn't hear what the motor was trying to tell them. You paid $1,000 to lose MPG, annoy your passengers, and go deaf to your own warning signs. Number 7. Steering stabilizers as a death wobble fix. This one is pure snake oil, and the aftermarket industry keeps selling it anyway. When a Wrangler starts shaking violently at highway speeds, the internet's go-to suggestion is always the same. Buy a heavy-duty dual steering stabilizer. It'll solve everything. Except it absolutely won't. A steering stabilizer is basically a shock absorber for your steering, and all it really does is mask vibrations. It does not fix the cause. The actual source of death wobble is usually worn track bar bushings, loose ball joints, bad tie rod ends, or a bent rim. Slapping a beefy stabilizer on top of those worn parts is like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. It might quiet the symptoms for a month or two, but those components keep failing underneath. However, when they finally let go completely, your shiny stabilizer can't save you from losing steering control at 65 miles per hour. You didn't fix anything. You paid $300 to delay a much bigger, much more dangerous problem down the road. Real quick, if you're serious about making your Jeep last and not wasting money on the wrong mods, I put together a full maintenance system that walks you through exactly what to do and what to avoid. It's linked in the description below if you want to see it. Number 6. Cheap knockoff snorkels. The snorkel look is iconic. Big black tube running up the A-pillar, making your Wrangler look ready to ford a river in Oregon. In theory, a real snorkel is genuinely useful because it pulls cooler, cleaner air from above the hood. But cheap knockoff snorkels cause more problems than they solve. The budget kits use thin plastic that cracks in cold weather, gaskets that leak water into your intake the first time it rains hard, and mounting brackets that flex so much they slowly tear the paint off your fender panel. And here's what nobody mentions until it's too late. A leaky snorkel is worse than no snorkel at all. Instead of pulling clean air from up high, it's now pulling dirty engine bay air plus water straight into your filter. So you watched one YouTube install, spent $200 on Amazon, and built a tube that's actively damaging the engine you thought you were protecting. Real snorkels from reputable brands exist, but most Wranglers rolling around with one are using the cheap ones. Number 5. Plug-in performance tuners on stock engines. The throttle response on a Wrangler is famously lazy off the line. So aftermarket companies sell plug-in tuners promising 30 extra horsepower and better miles per gallon for $400. Sounds amazing on paper. But most of these cheap tuners are just timing and fuel map adjustments that push the engine past what the factory engineers ever built it to handle. And the Pentastar already has documented issues with valve seat failures on older models and oil pump problems on newer ones. Running an aggressive tune accelerates every single one of those weak points. Even scarier, a lot of these tuners will absolutely void your powertrain warranty the moment the dealer plugs in a scanner and spots a non-factory flash. So now you've got a tuned engine that might grenade itself at 80,000 miles, and a dealer who just laughed you out of the service bay when you asked about coverage. A few extra ponies are not worth a $9,000 engine replacement down the line. Number 4. Stubby bumpers without a winch. Stubby bumpers look incredible. They expose the tires, give the Wrangler that aggressive stance, and they photograph beautifully from every angle. But owners install them for the look and ignore what they're actually engineered for. A stubby bumper exists so your tires can articulate wider on rock crawls without smashing into the bumper. That's the entire purpose. If you're not rock crawling, you just removed all the crash protection from the front of your Jeep for no functional reason at all. And it gets rougher than that. That steel stubby probably weighs 60 to 100 pounds more than the factory plastic bumper it replaced, and you didn't reinforce the front coils to compensate. So your ride gets stiffer, your front springs sag over the next year, and in a front-end collision, you lose the crumple zone the factory designed to protect your legs. You paid $900 to look tougher and get hurt worse if someone rear-ends a deer right in front of you. Number 3. Body lift kits. Body lifts are cheap, easy, and catastrophically bad for your Wrangler long-term. The idea sounds clever at first. Instead of lifting the suspension, you just raise the body itself off the frame using spacers, which gives you a few inches of clearance for bigger tires. Sounds smart, right? Wrong. A body lift does not actually increase your ground clearance at all, because your axles and suspension are still sitting at stock height. You just made your Jeep look taller while gaining absolutely nothing off-road. However, what you did do is create a long list of new problems. Your bumpers now float awkwardly below the body, leaving ugly gaps nobody can unsee. Your steering column gets misaligned, which burns through U-joints way faster than normal. The transfer case linkage gets stressed. And worst of all, body lifts are notorious for loosening over time, which causes creaks, rattles, and eventually dangerous mounting failures at highway speed. You got the look of a lift without any of the capability, plus a crop of new issues that'll show up a year later. Number 2. Aftermarket fender flares. Fender flares seem completely harmless. They're just plastic trim pieces around the wheel wells, right? Wrong. Cheap aftermarket flares are one of the most common reasons a Wrangler ends up with body rust down the line. The budget ones use cheap double-sided tape or poorly designed mounting brackets that trap water, dirt, and road salt against your fender paint. 6 months later, you pull them off for any reason and find a perfect ring of bubbling rust exactly where the flare used to sit. And the replacement nightmare is brutal. Because that rust already ate into your fender, you're not just buying new flares anymore. You're looking at bodywork, repainting, and blending color match across multiple panels. A $200 flare upgrade just turned into a $3,000 body shop bill. Meanwhile, the factory flares you yanked off were specifically engineered with drainage channels and proper mounting to prevent exactly that problem. But this last one destroys more Wranglers than every other mod on this list combined. Number 1. Oversized tires without regearing. This is the mod that wrecks more Wranglers than anything else in the aftermarket, and it's usually the very first upgrade people do. They slap 35s or 37s on a Jeep that came from the factory running 3.73 or 3.21 axle gears, and they don't touch the differentials at all. Then they're shocked when their transmission starts hunting for gears on every hill. Their MPG collapses, their engine lugs at highway speed, and their acceleration completely dies. One TJ owner reported going from 11 miles per gallon down into single digits because his 4.0 was constantly lugging under 35s with factory gearing, and he had to re-gear to 5.38 just to make the truck drivable again. However, the real damage happens underneath the Jeep. Running oversized tires on stock gears puts enormous stress on your transmission, your transfer case chain, and your axle shafts, because the drivetrain is working twice as hard to turn every wheel. Things start failing years earlier than they should. Owners who skip the re-gear often end up paying $4,000 to $6,000 later to replace a blown transmission or a snapped axle shaft. The proper fix is re-gearing to 4.56 or 4.88 first, which runs $2,500 to $3,500 before you even bolt the tires on. Most people skip that step to save money, and they pay triple for it later. So now I'm curious, what's the worst mod you've ever seen on a Wrangler? Or maybe one you regret doing yourself? Drop it in the comments. If you want to avoid expensive mistakes like these, hit subscribe. I break this stuff down every week. And there's another video on your screen right now that'll save you even more money on your Jeep. Go check that out. See you there.